So brother asked, why is Abu Hanifa so far away from the Qur'an and Sunnah? And is he even from Ahl Sunnah? So I answered this question like a 14-minute voice note, and here's the brief overview of what it was. And alhamdulillah, I came around to making tawbah from his belief that Imam Abu Hanifa was a deviant. Firstly, there's a difference between someone's aqidah and someone's views in fiqh. So the aqidah of Imam Abu Hanifa is very clear, and Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions this in his Fatawa al-Hamawiyah, and he mentions some of his quotes, and some of his quotes are very clear, such as he has a quote where he says, whoever says that I don't know whether Allah is in the heavens or if he is in the earth, then he has disbelieved. And meaning like in the heavens, like folk, above everything. And so this is very clear that he also will have very clear stances that are in line with the Salaf of the Ummah and whatnot. And also, there is a minor difference of opinion in the way that he views iman. So the way that he views iman is that he will say that iman isn't necessarily, the actions itself aren't necessarily iman, but if someone falls into an action, then it becomes clear, like a kufri action. If they fall into a kufri action, it becomes clear that the iman has left. And so, Ahl Sunnah and the Salaf, they're very clear about this, that they say that that iman itself is qawl, it's something that someone says, it's also fi'l, it's something that's it's an action, as well as niyyah, and that's like it's i'tiqad, it's something that's inside. And so it's all of these things. So it's actually, the action itself is a part of iman. So he has this difference of opinion where he says that it's not necessarily a part of iman, but at the end of the day, the result is the same in the way that he brings it apart. So he says that it's not the same thing, but they're connected. So if we see that this person fell into kufr, then it becomes clear that this person has disbelieved from the inside. And so this, yes, it's somewhat of a difference of opinion, that it does go against a lot of what the Salaf said, but the actual result of it is not far off, and it's something that's it's like understandable. And also, if you were to look at Bab al-Ridda or Kitab al-Ridda, which is like the Nawaqid al-Islam with the Ahnaf, they actually are very, very strict about a lot of the things that take people outside of Islam, even more so than like the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis and the Malikis, and a lot of issues. They're of the most strict and the most I'd say they're like the most strict when it comes to the things that someone could have takfir done on them because of. And this is well known within books of fiqh, that when you look into the Kitab al-Ridda, you'll find that they have a lot more details that they talk about of things that will take someone outside of Islam, and like this is like protecting Tawheed than other madahib, and they go to a lot more details when it comes to, so if someone does such and such, then they automatically become a disbeliever, blah 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 blah. And maybe I don't agree with them in all of the areas, but it shows that they're very keen on protecting Tawheed. Of course, that's not to say that, like within the followers of the madhab later, that there aren't those who came that aren't in line with the madhab of the Salaf. And this is the same with any madhab. Like we have the Shafi'i madhab, like the Shafi'is that came after Juwayni, a lot of them, they fell into what he was in of Ash'ari Aqidah, and so they're not alongside of Imam Shafi in his Aqidah, but they still are Shafi. And the same thing happens with the Ahnaf. And some of them, some people say that some of the Mu'tazili beliefs kind of permeated some of their books, like kind of undercover and whatnot. But of course, this is something that someone who is very acquainted with it, then they would know more about this than I would. And also, of course, there's a lot of Maturidis, like currently, a lot of the Hanafis will follow the Maturidi Aqidah. And so, of course, that's something. But that doesn't mean that Abu Hanifa had this Aqidah. No, this is something that people brought in afterwards. Now, when it comes to the other part of the question, which was kind of broken, he's like, why is Imam Abu Hanifa, why is he always so far deviated from the Qur'an and Sunnah? This is a broken question because we assume that the Qur'an and Sunnah is automatic, like it automatically creates a ruling without us having to go through the process of understanding what does it mean. And that process of understanding is where a mujtahid comes into play. And Abu Hanifa, without a doubt, according to all of the ulama of Islam, they all agree that he was a mujtahid, and that they all agree that he was wara', and that he was very righteous and pious, and he would stay away from any types of dubious matters. And of the like where he was at in his situation, there was a lot of ahadith that would be considered da'if. And in that place, he had a certain way of dealing with hadith that was a bit stricter in his method of how did he deal with ahad hadith. And this was because the area he was around was filled with da'if hadith. So he wanted to be extra careful not to ever go against the Qur'an and Sunnah. So he put extra stipulations on how he would use a hadith in relation to the Sunnah. So of these like principles that have a lot of differences that come down the line, is that he would say that if we have like a Quranic evidence, and then we also have a Sunnah evidence, and that Quranic evidence is general, then we hold on to this generality at all costs. And the Sunnah that comes that's specific, then we'd say like we can't necessarily specify the Quran with this ahad hadith. Because if we were to do this, then we would be taking away the meaning of the Quran by using this ahad hadith. And like we'd be limiting the meaning of the Quran, and this is qat'i, like this is absolute. Like we know that the Quran is absolute, we don't have a doubt about it. And for us to limit that large meaning of the Quran with something that is possible that there could be a mistake in it with like a ahad hadith, then we don't necessarily do this, because there's a possibility that we would be not following the Quran with this. And so this is one of the ways that he would do, like he doesn't do takhsis with ahad hadiths unless this particular thing already has takhsis on it. For him, when something comes general, it's absolute, that it's general meaning. Like if we have a general meaning, فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ. And so we have that to read whatever is easy from the Quran that comes. So he takes this and he says, okay, this is a general meaning, whatever is easy for us to read. Then this is what we would say that needs to be done in salah. And then to say that la salata illa bi fatihatil kitab, like if we were to say that there's no salah except with reciting the Fatiha, then he says, if we were to say this, we're limiting that openness that is in the Quran by فَقْرَأُوا مَا يَتَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ. And so he says, we can't necessarily limit that openness with this. But, so we won't say that reciting the Fatiha is fard. What will he say? He says it's wajib. Like the person who leaves it, his salah is sahih, but he is athim for doing this. And of course, there's other details of this. I'm not a Hanafi, so I'm not going to go into all the details of this. Whether or not, like, if he leaves it while he's able to do it with intentionally, does this break his salah or not? There's details to this as well. But there's a way that he deals with these issues that are much more complex. And also, he will have a big picture view of the Sharia. And because of this big picture view, if he gets a single hadith that seems to go against this big picture view, that comes from the Qur'an and Sunnah. Keynote, it comes from the Qur'an and Sunnah. This big picture view comes from the big major qawaid, the major principles of the Qur'an and Sunnah. So if he gets a one-off hadith that seems to go against this, then he's not necessarily going to take this hadith and automatically apply it unless certain conditions have been met in this. And so because of this, like you'll find a big difference between him and the Shafi'iyya. Like in the Shafi'iyya, as long as the hadith is sahih, we always take it and we always do takhsis of it with the Quran. And this is to make sure that we're always using all of the nusus. Do I believe this is the correct view? I believe it's the better view, without a doubt. But I understand where they're coming from. This is not an issue of him throwing away Qur'an and Sunnah. No, he's holding on to the big picture of the Qur'an and Sunnah. If any Sunnah comes that is like something that seems to go off of this major picture, then he's quick to do like ta'wil with that, and to make it mu'awwal until it fits with the general understanding that he brought out from the Qur'an. And the Qur'an and Sunnah is not something that is just automatically applicable. It takes an understanding for someone to bring out the understanding and interpret what it means and apply that. And so every single person who is ever holding on to Qur'an and Sunnah, they're holding on to the Qur'an and Sunnah according to an understanding of someone. Whether this someone is a mujtahid, then okay. Or this person's not even a mujtahid, which occasionally the madhabiyya, they try to hold on to the Qur'an and Sunnah while they aren't mujtahideen yet. And then they claim that the people who don't hold their same understanding are not holding on to the Quran and Sunnah, when they are holding on to the Quran and Sunnah according to the understanding of someone who is qualified. And this, of course, we have to go to people that are qualified to understand the Quran and Sunnah. It's not just left out and open like this. And so these are some of the areas where Imam Abu Hanifa, that he differs with like the rest of the Jumhur, meaning like from the Maliki and the Shafi'i and the Hanabila. But this doesn't mean that he's a deviant. It doesn't mean that he's not following the Qur'an and Sunnah. He has his reasons for doing this, and he is a mujtahid, and the mujtahid, he gets a reward. Whether he gets it right, he gets two rewards, and if he gets it wrong, then he was qualified. He gets one reward according to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Don't say bad things about scholars.